This week's Battletech Tactica has us back in the mech shop, and this is something that I'm going to be definitely pursuing, definitely considering more. I'm not going to say I'm changing my mind fully on it, but there's definitely more to revisit in that the large laser perhaps is better than the PPC. Now, if you've been following my Battletech channel for any amount of time, you know that I love big guns, I love big damage. You can have your fancy plans and your deployment and all your technology. You start taking some serious damage, PPCs, AC-20s, LRM-20 packs. That's going to have some bite. It's hard to argue with that. And tactics are important in Battletech, but being able to consistently deliver damage is very, very important. Those raw alpha numbers. But then we get into things like frequency and heat and mobility and range, and there's other factors that may move that around a little bit. And I feel like when we're exploring various mechs, the large laser versus the PPC is kind of in an interesting area. Now, you do have some light mechs that, for their design, they're carrying a PPC or they're carrying a large laser. That's kind of off script a little bit. Most light mechs, because of the limited tonnage, once you put in the bare essentials, the fusion engine, the components, the heat sinks, a little bit of armor, you don't have much left to play with. So we see stuff like medium lasers as the primary weapon. We see light autocannons. We see small lasers. We see SRM 2-packs. We see machine guns as secondary. When you move to medium mechs, and there's a big jump from light mechs to medium, there's a big jump from medium to heavy, but not as much as you think. So now, once you get to medium mechs, you start to see the ability to mount PPCs. Now, in terms of weight and other factors, they might go with an autocannon 10. You make that jump now to heavy mechs. Now we've got some tonnage to play with. Once we put in the components, you have a lot more for armor and weapons. And you tend to see the primary weapons on heavier mechs to be PPCs. We look at, let's move into assault mechs. You look at the Battlemaster. You look at the Awesome. Let's move to heavy mechs. We look at the Marauder. We look at the Warhammer. There's not that many mechs out there that mount a large laser as that primary weapon. The two that come to mind, the Thunderbolt and, of course, the Phoenix Hawk, the classic Phoenix Hawk. But it seems with that jump, if you're not doing a novelty light with a PPC and the tonnage, when you make that jump, that PPC focuses on it. Because primarily what you're looking at is 2 more points of damage and some extended range. Those are 2 tactics right there that just work really well. Hit you before you hit me, push out more than you can push me, and do a little bit of damage over 3, 4, 5 turns of hitting. Those 2 points can add up. But there's some costs in there. In terms of heat, in terms of ranges, and in terms of minimums. So let's jump in now that we've got that framework, exploring just the stat blocks, large laser for PPC, for those of us who don't have that memorized, or we have that memorized, but so much more that it's easy to kind of forget what you've got. So the large laser, 8 heat, 8 damage. 8 damage is still pretty good. I mean, 5 is good. Anything over 5 is solid. It's a real threat to lights. They don't want to get hit at all. Mediums can take a few hits, and over multiple weapon systems, they can even put the hurt on heavies and assaults. So we've got 8-8. 0 minimum. Now, in Battletech, for those new mech warriors and mech commanders, some weapons have a minimum range, which it doesn't mean you can't fire them at or under this. It means that there's penalties. This idea, my understanding is the electrical discharge generated by the PPCs can kind of affect your mech. So there's some safeguards where it takes more power. So at closer ranges, it's harder to use. We don't want that feedback. We see this with long-range missile systems. The idea that the missiles take a little bit more time to fly out and they've got safety measures in it. It's kind of a game-type balance, because if we're pushing out one end, inner sphere tech, with range and damage, when you get in close, you need some balance there. So I do understand it's a balance mechanic with a little bit of the narrative to back it up. But we're not looking at any minimums with the large laser. That means whatever that range is, yeah, you've got hit modifiers and stuff like that. Whatever that range is, you have the ability to push that out, or at point blank, fire everything. You can do that. Let's look at range. Short, medium, long. 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. 15 hexes out is still solid, and it's a little bit longer than you think, because when you mount these on medium machines, they've still got decent movement. So really, when you're looking at a weapon's range, especially if you're trying to calculate movement and trying to stay out of range from your opponent, the projected movement bubble or movement cone would be the range of the weapon plus the maximum ability of the mech or the target or the vehicle to move, pushing that out. So 15 plus movement, that's got some serious range to it. It's got solid range. And then tons, 5 tons. That's important for trying to mount it in certain vehicles and machines. We're going to leave C-bills out of this equation right now. Now we jump to the PPC. 10 heat. I like that already. 10 heat, 10 damage, 10-10. You've got a little bit more heat. You've got a little bit more damage. Heat is a big problem in a lot of inner sphere machines, especially with the heavies and the assaults. You want to be able to consistently fire these things, especially if you have multiples. You might not be able to do that, or if you do that, there's going to be other trade-offs. So that, right away, that lack of heat flexibility, because there is a difference between 8 and 10, not only in damage, but in heat. The large laser might have the potential to do more damage because you're firing it every single turn, where the PPC, you can't necessarily do that without suffering other extreme penalties or having certain machines that are cleared to do that. Let's look at minimum, 3 hex minimum. So which means if you're at or under that minimum, now more bonuses are going to stack up against you, or I should say modifiers. Not as bad as you think, because you are technically at that short range. So it's trading some modifiers for others with that. So it's essentially like if you're at short range and you're under those minimums, you're really firing at kind of medium range. If you can keep your movement down, play there. It's not as bad, but it is something that we have to be aware of. Short, medium, long. 1 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18. Doing a little higher math here, the difference is plus 3 hexes at long range, plus additional damage, those 2 points. That's what it has over the large laser. And of course, again, going back to that movement cone, it's not just the range, but it's also how far the mech or the machine can use. And 7 tons. That adds up a little bit in some of the lighter mechs and machines, but again, not a ton of weight difference. And then, of course, we're not looking at ammo. These are both energy-based weapons. So the tactica there is I don't have to worry about ammo supplies, feeds, ammo location, internal hits, explosions, heating, cooking things off, pushing it that nature. Now, the tactica of the large laser, I'm trading 2 damage, but I'm potentially gaining the ability to fire this weapon more often and fire this weapon at extreme close range without any of those modifiers, the minimum range. That might be important, because if we're close range, I might be danger close locked in where I can't disengage. You know, we talk about this idea when 2 mechs get close to each other, 1 to 2, 3 hexes away. Now, if they're in a same movement class, you can backpedal, walk, but you can't backpedal, run. I can move forward, walk or run, stay on top of you. We're both going to keep our weapons locked at each other. So I don't want to say the tactica is just smashing buttons and firing stuff, but that ability to now fire without a penalty to minimum. Plus, even though I'm doing less damage, less heat, I can sustain that fire more at both long and short range. It does less damage, but now we get into the possibility equation of, if I can put myself in a good spot tactically on the hex map, technically crunching the numbers, if I fire the large laser more, then despite less damage, I have the chance to do more overall damage of the game compared to the PPCs. So this is something that I'm kind of looking at some machines that might be a little bit overlooked based on player personality for raw alpha damage, and looking at those large lasers as a primary type weapon. And again, the classics would be the Phoenix Hawk and the Thunderbolt, the T-Bolt, if we're looking in those weight classes. So turning it over to my fellow, and I think the Grasshopper. Yes, I should know this, right? All this Battletech, it's all, the Grasshopper also has as its primary a large laser and then a whole brace of secondaries with the medium lasers. And it has that one LRM 5-pack in the head. It's almost like you want to drop that 5 and maybe pick up something else, turn it into a pure energy boat, and then from there just zap away, right? Electrify away. But turning it over to my fellow mech enthusiasts, mech commanders, mech warriors, what are some other primary mechs that have as that loadout a large laser, leveraging that as the primary weapon as opposed to autocannon 10s and PPCs? And in terms of looking at the two, is the large laser really a sleeper type weapon?